Sophia Carter gazed out the airplane window as the sprawling Arizona desert stretched like an endless canvas below her. Despite the serene blue sky outside, her thoughts were anything but calm. At 34, she was the esteemed CEO of Visionary Innovations, a tech company known for redefining the market. To the world, Sophia was the embodiment of confidence and power, a self-made woman who had climbed the ladder of success from modest beginnings. Yet, hidden beneath her composed exterior lay a lingering question that had begun to gnaw at her resolve. What does it mean to belong? This question wasn't born out of idle curiosity. It stemmed from a more profound struggle that had been reignited by her relationship with David Blake, a sharp-witted attorney with a charm that seemed to disarm everyone but her fears. David was her partner in every sense of the word, loyal, attentive, and deeply in love. But no matter how many times he reassured her of his feelings, Sophia couldn't quiet the doubts that whispered in the back of her mind. It wasn't David she doubted, but herself. What would his family think of her? Would they see her as the same driven, accomplished woman who had built her empire from the ground up? Or would they reduce her to the girl who once struggled to make ends meet, watching her mother stretch a meager grocery budget to feed them both? Worse still, would she measure up to the expectations of the Blakes, a family rooted in wealth, tradition, and a legacy of privilege? These questions, however, weren't ones Sophia intended to ask outright. Instead, she conceived a bold plan to allow her to uncover the truth without revealing her vulnerability. It wasn't the celebrated CEO they would meet. For the next several weeks, she would step into their world not as Sophia Carter but as a housekeeper named Grace, a woman living far from the luxury of boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. Her goal was clear: to see beyond the polished surface of the Blake family, to learn whether their values matched their sophisticated facade, and most importantly, to determine if David truly belonged in her life. Sophia's reflection in the window caught her eye as the plane descended toward the small airport. The face that stared back was familiar and foreign, a blend of the ambitious woman she had become and the humble girl she had once been. Little did Sophia know the road ahead would challenge her perceptions of the Blakes and her understanding of herself. The world she was about to enter promised revelations she couldn't yet foresee, and with every step, she would edge closer to a truth she both craved and feared. The question now wasn't whether the Blakes would pass her silent test. It was whether she dared to face the answers she sought. Sophia stepped off the plane into the dry heat of the Arizona desert, her resolve firm despite the uncertainty swirling in her chest. She carried only a modest duffel bag, a stark contrast to the designer luggage she was accustomed to. She had carefully planned every detail of her transformation. In the small airport restroom, she changed out of her tailored blazer and sleek slacks into plain, worn jeans and a loose button-up shirt. Gone were the subtle touches of her usual makeup. She wiped them clean, leaving her face bare except for a hint of nervous determination. She caught her reflection in the cracked mirror and barely recognized herself. The transformation was deliberate. Sophia Carter, the polished CEO, was gone. In her place stood Grace, a humble housekeeper ready to blend into the background of the Blake household. She tied her hair into a messy bun, stuffing her shiny black pumps into her bag and slipping on scuffed sneakers instead. The gravity of her decision sank in as she hailed a modest rideshare vehicle instead of the usual town car or private driver she would have used. It wasn't just about altering her appearance, but fully immersing herself into this new life. She would live as someone else for the next few weeks, casting aside the privileges she had worked hard to earn. When the car pulled up to the Blake estate, her breath caught. The mansion loomed before her, a sprawling structure of pristine white stone surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. Marble columns framed the entrance, and ornate iron gates hinted at the wealth and tradition she was stepping into. She had seen opulence before, but this was different. Old money, a legacy of wealth passed through generations. Sophia hesitated as she approached the door, clutching the small bag containing her entire disguise. Before she could gather her thoughts, the heavy oak door opened, revealing Helen Blake, the family matriarch. Helen's sharp eyes scanned her from head to toe, her expression unreadable but her disapproval palpable. "You must be the new hire," Helen said without a smile or a greeting. Her tone was clipped, and the words were spoken as though Sophia's presence was inconvenient. "Come in. We don't have all day." Sophia stepped inside, her heart pounding as she took in the grandeur of the foyer. The polished floors gleamed under a massive crystal chandelier, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors adorned the walls. She felt small and out of place, but reminded herself that this was her chosen role. Helen wasted no time laying down the rules. Punctuality is non-negotiable. Common areas must be spotless at all times. And do not, under any circumstances, interact unnecessarily with family members. Your job is to ensure this household runs smoothly behind the scenes, nothing more. The words stung each, reminding us of how Helen viewed people like her Grace. Sophia nodded respectfully, murmuring, "Understood, ma'am," while silently vowing to observe every nuance of this woman's behavior. As Helen walked away, Sophia released a quiet breath and glanced around the space. She was struck by how cold the house felt despite its beauty. The air carried a formality that suffocated warmth, and the grandeur seemed designed to intimidate rather than invite. She had her work cut out for her. Sophia was still adjusting to her surroundings when a warm voice broke through the tension. "You must be the new helper. Welcome." She turned to see a young woman with a kind smile and bright, curious eyes. Emily, the youngest member of the household staff, was carrying a heavy tray of dishes. Her demeanor starkly contrasted Helen's, radiating warmth and genuine friendliness. "Thank you," Sophia said softly, feeling an unexpected sense of relief. "Don't let Helen intimidate you," Emily whispered conspiratorially. "She's like that with everyone. But it's not so bad once you get the hang of things. I'll show you around." Sophia followed Emily through the labyrinthine corridors of the mansion, learning where cleaning supplies were kept, which rooms she would be responsible for, and the unspoken rules of the household. As they walked, Emily shared snippets of her life, how she had started working for the Blakes to support her family, her love for books, and her dream of studying business management. "It's hard, though," Emily admitted as they paused in the kitchen. "Between work and helping my mom, there's no time or money for school. But someday, maybe." Her voice trailed off, the wistfulness in her tone tugging at Sophia's heart. Sophia listened intently, her respect for Emily growing with every word. She saw in the young woman a reflection of her struggles, a fierce determination to rise above the circumstances life had dealt her. The days that followed were grueling. Helen seemed to find fault in everything Sophia did, from how she polished the silverware to how she folded the linens. The criticism was relentless, yet Sophia endured it quietly, observing Helen's every move while keeping her emotions in check. Emily, however, was a bright spot in the chaos. During their brief moments of respite, the two would share stories and jokes, forging a bond that Sophia hadn't expected. Emily's resilience inspired her, and she began to see her mission in a new light. This wasn't just about testing the Blakes, but about making a difference for someone like Emily. One evening, as they scrubbed the kitchen counters side by side, Emily confided, "I just want to be respected for my intelligence, not just for how well I clean a house." Sophia touched her shoulder and said quietly, "You deserve that respect, Emily. And I promise, one day you'll have it." As the sun set over the Blake estate, Sophia lay awake on the narrow bed in her tiny room, the day's events replaying in her mind. Her disguise was holding, but the emotional toll was heavier than anticipated. Each interaction with Helen or Richard exposed another layer of hypocrisy, but Emily's quiet strength kept her going. Sophia knew this journey would be more complicated than she had imagined. But as she stared at the ceiling, she also knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't leave the Blake's world without ensuring that Emily's dream had a chance to come true. The days in the Blake household began to blur into a pattern of demands, criticisms, and moments of quiet reflection. Helen's sharp eyes seemed to follow Sophia everywhere, her icy tone cutting into even the most minor mistakes. "This floor isn't spotless," Helen snapped one morning as Sophia knelt to scrub the ornate marble tiles. "I expect to see my reflection when I look down." Sophia bit back the urge to retort, swallowing her frustration as she mumbled, "Yes, ma'am." The weight of the disguise pressed heavily on her, but she knew she couldn't falter. When Helen's voice rang out condescending, It fueled Sophia's determination to uncover the truth. Richard, on the other hand, was a quieter force in the house. He rarely spoke directly to Sophia, but his presence loomed large. He spent most of his time in the study, his face often buried in a book about ethics or corporate responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia, who had yet to see him treat a single staff member with the values he so publicly championed. But amidst the tension, Emily was a beacon of warmth and humanity in an otherwise frigid household. During breaks, Emily would sit with Sophia in the small staff quarters, sharing stories about her mother, Camila, who had once worked for the Blakes. "My mom loved this job at first," Emily said one afternoon, her voice tinged with sadness. "She believed it would give her a better life. But Helen," Emily hesitated, her hands gripping the mug of tea she held. "Helen found a reason to fire her. My mom never talked about it, but I know it broke her. She never recovered, and we struggled to keep our home." Sophia felt a pang of anger and guilt. She had chosen to infiltrate this household to understand its dynamics, but now she saw the collateral damage these people had inflicted. She vowed to dig deeper into what had happened to Camila, not just for Emily's sake, but to confront Helen and Richard for their actions. The tipping point came when Oliver returned. Sophia heard Oliver's voice from the kitchen, his warm laughter echoing through the halls. "It looks like the prince is back," Emily said with a wry smile, setting down a tray of glasses. Sophia's heart raced at the sound of his familiar voice. Oliver had a presence that could fill any room, and she knew his return would complicate her mission. She braced herself while washing dishes, determined to stay in character. Moments later, Oliver entered the kitchen, his energy as vibrant as ever. He paused when he saw Sophia, his eyes briefly narrowing as though something about her seemed familiar. "You must be the new housekeeper," he said, his tone friendly but distant. Sophia turned to him, keeping her gaze lowered. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. Oliver studied her for a moment longer before nodding. "Well, welcome. I hope my mother hasn't been too hard on you." He flashed a charming smile that made Sophia's heart ache with memories of their life outside this house. "She's been very clear about her expectations," Sophia replied diplomatically, earning a knowing chuckle from Oliver. Over the next few days, Sophia's presence didn't go unnoticed by Oliver. He often caught glimpses of her in the hallways or the garden, his curiosity about her growing. Meanwhile, Helen's demeanor became even more severe, and her suspicions were evident in how she scrutinized Sophia's every move. One afternoon, as Sophia scrubbed the grand staircase, Oliver approached her again. This time, his tone was more direct. "Have we met before?" he asked, tilting his head as he studied her face. Sophia froze for a moment, but quickly shook her head. "I don't believe so, sir." Oliver frowned slightly, but didn't press further. "There's just something about you," he murmured before walking away. That evening, Sophia found Emily in their shared quarters, tears streaming down her face. Helen had reprimanded her harshly during dinner service, accusing her of incompetence over a minor mistake. "It's not fair," Emily said, her voice shaking. "No matter how hard I try, it's never enough for her." Sophia placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "You're not alone in this," she said firmly, "and you're more than what they see you as. Don't let them define your worth." Sophia's resolve deepened. This wasn't just about testing the Blakes anymore. It was about giving Emily the hope and courage she needed to pursue her dreams. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of her tiny room, she knew she couldn't keep her identity hidden forever. Oliver was already suspicious, and the truth would come out sooner. When it did, would it bring the change she hoped for, or unravel everything she had worked to achieve? The clatter of a silver tray in the kitchen shattered the afternoon's quiet. Sophia rushed in to find Emily standing still, her hands trembling. Helen's sharp voice echoed through the room. "How many times must I remind you? Perfection is the standard here." Helen's glare pierced through Emily, who muttered a shaky apology before returning to the dishes. Sophia clenched her fists, biting her tongue to stay in character. Every interaction with Helen further revealed her lack of regard for those who worked tirelessly in her household. But as much as Sophia wanted to defend Emily, she knew she had to remain an observer, for now. Later that day, as she cleaned Richard's study, Sophia noticed a drawer slightly ajar. Inside were stacks of meticulously filed documents, each bearing the unmistakable seal of the Blake family business. Among them, a folder marked Employee Records caught her attention. Curiosity got the better of her. She opened it, her heart sinking as she skimmed through termination letters and performance reviews. She found the record for Camila Hayes, Emily's mother, near the bottom of the stack. The termination letter cited disrespectful behavior as the reason for dismissal. Sophia frowned, reading between the lines. Helen had found a convenient excuse to get rid of someone she deemed unworthy of her household. The injustice ignited a fire in Sophia. She carefully returned the papers and left the study, determined to find a way to confront the Blakes about their hypocrisy. As Emily prepared dinner that evening, Sophia sat beside her, lowering her voice to a whisper. "I found something today. About your mother." Emily froze, her eyes widening. "What do you mean?" Sophia hesitated, knowing the weight of her words. Her termination. Helen used an excuse to dismiss her. It wasn't about her work. It was personal. Emily's lips trembled, anger and sadness washing over her. "I knew it. My mom always said she didn't understand why they let her go. She thought she'd done something wrong." "She didn't," Sophia said firmly. "And you don't deserve this treatment either. We'll figure this out." Emily nodded, wiping away a tear. "Thank you, Grace. I don't know why you care, but thank you." Sophia smiled faintly, the weight of her secret pressing harder on her chest. She cared because she understood, and she cared because change was long overdue in this house. The following day brought an unexpected confrontation. Sophia was scrubbing the main hall's marble floor when Oliver appeared, leaning casually against the doorway. "You know," he began, his voice light but curious, "there's something about you I can't figure out. You're different from the others." Sophia's heart pounded, but she kept her gaze on her work. "I'm just doing my job, sir. Call me Oliver," he said with a smile. "And no, it's not just that. The way you carry yourself, it's like you've been in rooms far grander than this one. Am I wrong?" Sophia paused, glancing up briefly. "Perhaps you're overthinking, Oliver." He tilted his head, his smile fading slightly as his eyes narrowed. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm starting to see something you don't want me to." Before she could respond, Helen's voice called from another room, summoning Oliver for a meeting. He hesitated, casting one last glance at Sophia before leaving. That afternoon, tensions reached a boiling point. Irritated over a slight slight during lunch, Helen rated Emily in front of the other staff. "If you can't meet my standards, perhaps you're better suited for less demanding work." Emily's face flushed red with humiliation, but she remained silent. Sophia, however, couldn't hold back any longer. "Mrs. Blake," she said, her voice calm but firm, "don't you think respect should be part of those high standards?" The room fell silent, the other staff members glancing nervously between Helen and Sophia. Helen's eyes widened in shock before narrowing into a glare. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Sophia said, rising to her feet. "Mistakes happen, but belittling someone for them doesn't reflect well on this household, or you." Helen's jaw tightened. "You forget your place." "Maybe it's time someone reminded you of yours," Sophia replied, her heart pounding. Before Helen could respond, Oliver entered the room, his eyes darting between the two women. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone cautious. Sophia stepped back, her heart still racing. "Nothing, sir. Just a misunderstanding." Oliver's gaze lingered on her, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Grace, a word, please." In the privacy of the study, Oliver closed the door and turned to her. "Who are you?" Sophia hesitated, knowing the moment of truth was near. "I'm exactly who I've said I am," she replied carefully. "No, you're not," Oliver said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You challenge my mother, defend the staff, and speak with confidence that doesn't belong to a housekeeper. I know there's more to you." Sophia took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. "And if there is? Then tell me," he said softly. "I deserve to know." For a moment, she considered confessing everything, but the risk was too significant. Instead, she said, "You'll find out when the time is right." Oliver sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine. But whatever you're hiding, I'll figure it out. As he left the room, Sophia felt relief and dread. The cracks in her disguise were growing, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. That evening, she found Emily sitting quietly in the garden, her expression distant. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, sitting beside her. Emily nodded faintly. "I'm just tired. Tired of feeling small." Sophia placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not small, Emily. You have dreams, and you have potential. Don't let them take that from you." Emily smiled weakly. "Sometimes it feels impossible." "It's not," Sophia said firmly, "and I'll prove it to you." As the stars began to dot the sky, Sophia made a silent vow. She would stand up for herself and Emily, and everyone treated as less by the Blakes. No matter the cost, she would ensure their voices were heard. The tension in the Blake household simmered for days, and Sophia could feel the weight of her disguise beginning to crack under Oliver's growing suspicions. Every glance he cast her way seemed to ask silent questions she wasn't ready to answer. But she knew her time was running out. The truth had to be revealed, and it had to be on her terms. It was during one of the Blake family's opulent dinners that Sophia made her move. Helen and Richard were seated at the head of the grand dining table, entertaining a pair of wealthy guests with shallow laughter and exaggerated stories of their family's charitable endeavors. Sophia stood silently by the door, a tray balanced in her hands, her presence deliberately unacknowledged by the group. "Housekeepers these days," Helen said with a tight smile, her voice carrying over clinking glasses, "are competent enough, but they lack refinement. It's rare to find someone who truly understands the standards of this household." Sophia felt her grip tighten on the tray. She had endured enough. Clearing her throat, she stepped forward, placing the tray on the table with deliberate precision. "Mrs. Blake," she began, her voice steady but carrying an edge of authority, "perhaps the issue isn't with the housekeepers, but with the standards they're expected to meet." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, Helen's expression hardening into icy disbelief. "Excuse me?" Helen's tone was sharp, almost venomous. Sophia straightened her posture, letting the calm confidence of her true self shine through. "I think it's time you know the truth," she said, her voice unwavering. "My name isn't Grace. My name is Sophia Carter, CEO of Visionary Innovations and David's girlfriend." Gasps echoed around the table. Helen's face paled while Richard slowly removed his glasses, clearly struggling to process what he had just heard. "This must be some kind of joke," Helen snapped, though her voice wavered. "It's no joke," Sophia said firmly. "I came here to see who you are. I wanted to understand the values behind the facade, to know if this family is one I can trust and respect." Sitting near the middle of the table, David looked at her in stunned silence. Finally, he spoke. "Sophia, why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I needed to see for myself," she replied, meeting his gaze. "I needed to understand how this household treats those not born into privilege." The fallout from Sophia's revelation was swift and chaotic. Helen rose from her seat, her voice trembling with anger. "How dare you come into my home and deceive us like this? Who do you think you are?" Sophia held her ground. "I think I'm someone who has seen the cracks in the foundation of this household. And if you're honest with yourselves, you'll admit you've seen them too." Richard, who had remained quiet up to this point, finally spoke. "What is it you want from us?" Sophia turned to him, her tone softening slightly. "I want accountability. I want you to see the people who work in this house as more than tools to maintain your image. And I want you to understand the damage your actions have caused." David stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "Mom, Dad, she's right. I've looked the other way for too long. But seeing how you've treated Emily and the other staff is not right. We need to do better." Helen's mouth opened as if to protest, but the words faltered. The room was filled with a heavy, uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then, Emily appeared in the doorway, her expression hesitant but determined. "I don't want pity," Emily said, her voice steady. "I want a chance to be seen for who I am, not just for what I can do for you." Sophia turned to Helen and Richard. "This is your moment to decide what kind of people you want to be. You can hold on to your created image or take the first step towards something better. Helen looked at Richard, her icy demeanor cracking under the moment's weight. Slowly, she nodded. What do you suggest? She asked, her voice quieter now. Sophia smiled faintly, sensing the shift. Start by supporting Emily's education. Help her achieve the dreams she's had to put on hold because of circumstances beyond her control. Richard cleared his throat. Consider it done, he said, his voice steady but carrying a note of genuine regret. Sophia felt relieved, but she knew the road ahead would be extended. Change didn't come overnight, and the Blakes had a lifetime of habits to unlearn. But this was a start. Over the next few days, the dynamics in the Blake household began to shift. Though still stern, Helen made a visible effort to soften her approach. She apologized to Emily, haltingly at first but with growing sincerity, and began discussing plans to fund her education. True to his word, Richard initiated reforms within his company, focusing on inclusivity and fair treatment for all employees. He even invited Sophia to consult on the new policies, acknowledging her expertise and insight. David, meanwhile, grew closer to Sophia in a way neither of them had expected. Their relationship deepened, built on a newfound respect and understanding. As Sophia prepared to leave the Blake mansion, Emily pulled her aside. "Thank you," Emily said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "You didn't have to do any of this, but you did. You changed my life." Sophia placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "No, Emily, you're the one who changed. I just helped you see what you were capable of." As Sophia drove away from the estate, she glanced at the rearview mirror, watching the grand mansion shrink into the distance. She had come seeking answers but left with something much more significant, the knowledge that even the most entrenched systems could begin to change with the right push. And while her journey with the Blakes had concluded, she knew her mission was far from over. For every Emily, countless others were waiting for their moment of hope, and Sophia was determined to keep fighting for them. An unusual quiet in the Blake household marked the days following Sophia's departure. The usual sharpness in Helen's tone had softened, and Richard seemed preoccupied, spending more time in his study than ever. David, too, carried himself differently. He seemed introspective, reflecting on what Sophia's bold move had revealed about his family. For Emily, however, life had taken an exciting turn. With the scholarship promised by Richard and Helen, she began preparing for her enrollment in a prestigious business school. It was the first time in years she felt like her dreams weren't just distant fantasies but real, attainable goals. As the CEO of Visionary Innovations, Sophia, now back in her world, kept in touch with Emily through weekly calls. "Remember," Sophia said during one conversation, "this is your moment. Don't let anyone make you feel small again." Emily's voice, once timid, now carried a spark of confidence. "I won't, Sophia, and thank you for everything." Meanwhile, Helen struggled to reconcile the woman she had been with, the woman she now aspired to become. She began participating actively in volunteer programs and attending community events not to showcase her wealth, but to understand the challenges those less fortunate face. At first, her efforts felt awkward, even forced, but Helen discovered a genuine sense of purpose as time passed. Inspired by Sophia's words, Richard initiated company-wide changes to ensure fair treatment for employees. He launched mentorship programs for workers in lower-level positions, providing them opportunities to advance within the company. Though his public image as a socially responsible leader remained intact, he began to reflect on his. For the actualist time, David became a bridge between Sophia and his family, often mediating discussions and pushing for further changes within the household. "This isn't about guilt," he told his parents one evening. "It's about doing what's right." Months later, the Blake estate bustled with energy as friends and family gathered for an outdoor celebration. It wasn't a gala or charity dinner, but a more personal affair. Emily's send-off to business school. The garden was transformed into a warm, welcoming space filled with string lights and simple floral arrangements. Tables were lined with photographs of Emily's journey, from childhood snapshots to recent moments captured in the mansion. Sophia arrived with David, her presence immediately drawing attention. She had become a legend within the Blake family's social circle, the woman who had infiltrated the estate and sparked a transformation. Helen greeted her with a tentative but genuine smile. Sophia, thank you for coming. I hope you'll forgive me for everything. Sophia returned the smile, her tone kind but firm. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Helen. It's about moving forward. And I see that you've taken that step. Richard joined them, offering a handshake. Sophia, I owe you an apology as well. I thought we were doing enough. You showed us that we weren't even close. Sophia nodded. Acknowledging that is the hardest part, Richard. The rest is action, and I'm glad you're taking it. Emily, glowing with excitement, approached Sophia and David. Can you believe it? She asked, her voice full of joy. Tomorrow, I'll be in my first business lecture. Sophia placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. I can believe it because you earned it. This is just the beginning, Emily. During the evening speeches, Sophia was invited to address the crowd. Standing under the twinkling lights, she spoke from the heart. Emily's journey reminds us of something we often forget. Potential knows no boundaries. It doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is having someone believe in you, even when the world doesn't. And sometimes, that belief starts with a small act of kindness. The crowd erupted into applause, and Sophia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Later, as the celebration wound down, David and Sophia slipped away to the quiet edge of the garden. They sat on a bench under the stars, the hum of conversation fading into the background. You've changed everything, David said softly, taking Sophia's hand. Not everything, Sophia replied with a smile, but enough to make a difference. David looked at her with admiration. So, what's next? Sophia leaned against him, her gaze fixed on the stars. We keep going. There's still so much to do. For every Emily, there's someone else waiting for their chance. And I won't stop until they get it. David squeezed her hand. You won't have to do it alone. We'll do it together. At that moment, Sophia realized that her mission had grown beyond a personal quest for understanding. It had become a movement she was determined to carry forward. Not just with David, but with every person who believed in building a better, more compassionate world. The garden lights flickered gently in the breeze, a symbol of the hope that now shone brightly in the hearts of everyone present. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of Sophia's actions rippled far beyond the Blake estate. Helen and Richard continued to honor their commitments, but more importantly, their attitudes toward the people around them shifted meaningfully. Helen initiated a new community outreach program focused on supporting underprivileged families, and for the first time, she actively listened to the struggles shared by those she helped. One afternoon, Helen visited a shelter where she met a single mother who reminded her of Emily. The woman had been juggling 2 jobs while caring for her children, barely managing to keep a roof over their heads. Instead of offering platitudes or detached charity, Helen asked, "What do you need most right now?" The woman hesitated before replying, "A chance? Someone to believe in me." Those words echoed in Helen's mind long after she left. Inspired by the encounter, she partnered with local organizations to provide education and vocational training for individuals in similar situations. It wasn't just about writing checks anymore, but about creating opportunities. Richard, too, began to view his company differently. Under Sophia's guidance, he implemented policies to improve working conditions and ensure fair pay. He also launched a mentorship program, pairing senior executives with entry-level employees to foster a culture of growth and inclusion. Emily thrived in business school, and her natural intelligence and work ethic quickly earned her recognition among professors and peers. Sophia's company, Visionary Innovations, offered Emily an internship where she applied her newfound knowledge to real-world challenges. Watching Emily excel filled Sophia with pride, but reinforced her belief that countless others like her were waiting for their chance. Months later, Sophia and David stood before a packed auditorium at the launch of a new initiative they had developed together, the Elevate Foundation. Designed to provide scholarships, mentorship, and resources for underprivileged youth, the foundation was a direct result of Sophia's time at the Blake estate. This foundation isn't just about funding education or launching careers, Sophia said as she addressed the crowd. It's about breaking down social, economic, and psychological barriers. It's about giving people the tools to believe in themselves and the courage to dream bigger. David stepped forward, his hand brushing against hers in quiet support. This is personal for us, he added, because we've seen how transformative even a single opportunity can be. This is about creating a legacy far beyond what we could achieve alone. The applause was thunderous, and as Sophia looked out at the audience, she spotted Emily in the front row, beaming with pride. After the event, Emily approached Sophia and David, holding a small envelope. "I wanted to give you this," she said, trembling slightly. Sophia opened it to find a handwritten note. "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Because of you, I see a future I never thought was possible." Sophia hugged her tightly. "This is just the beginning, Emily, and one day, you'll give someone else their chance." The foundation's work quickly gained momentum, drawing attention from philanthropists and business leaders alike. Helen and Richard, to Sophia's surprise, became some of its most vocal supporters, contributing financially and sharing their own experiences of transformation. In their private moments, Sophia and David often reflected on how far they had come, as individuals and as a couple. One evening, as they walked through the now vibrant garden of the Blake estate, David stopped and turned to her. "You know," he said with a smile, "this all started because you wanted to test me." Sophia laughed softly, her eyes sparkling. "And I'm glad I did, because I found someone willing to grow and change, no matter how difficult it might be." David took her hand, his expression serious but tender. "You changed all of us, Sophia, and because of you, we're building something that will outlast us, a legacy of compassion and opportunity." As they stood beneath the stars, the weight of their journey felt lighter, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. Sophia knew challenges would always be ahead, but with David by her side and the Elevate Foundation paving the way, she was ready to face them. The future wasn't just bright, it was boundless. At that moment, Sophia realized that the most significant impact she could ever have wasn't in the boardroom or even the Blake household. It was in the lives of people like Emily, who now saw the world as a place of infinite possibility. And so, the story of Sophia, David, and the Blakes wasn't just one of transformation. It was one of hope, proving that even the most minor acts of courage and kindness can spark change reverberating for generations.